Australia is full of silent reminders of bravery, of carnage, and of loss. Thousands of them dot the landscape. Then once a year, they snap to attention as sites of sacred ritual and remembrance on Anzac Day.
Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Why is it that this day, above all others, speaks to the national imagination? When war is declared in 1914, Australia immediately volunteers to take part. The young men Australia sends overseas are thrown into battle on April the 25th, 1915. The Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, known as Anzac, join an Anglo-French invasion of the Gallipoli Peninsula as part of a high-risk campaign against Germany's ally, the Ottoman Empire.
The first reports about the landing at Gallipoli arrive in late April with a message from the King, and then on the 8th of May with a message from Ashmead Bartlett, one of the British war correspondents. Neither of them say what actually happened. They just say there's been a successful landing in Turkey. But it was enough. The celebrations were instantaneous all over Australia.
While their countrymen celebrate, the Anzacs are discovering the reality of war.
This war, very quickly, is no joke. I mean, the papers are saying what a great achievement the landing at Anzac was, and it was, although the Turks basically won the Battle of the Landing. But far more important, very quickly, was the shock of casualties, the suffering of the wounded, the fact of death all around you, which men had to get used to, the loss of friends.
2,000 Australians are killed or die of their wounds during the first 10 days of fighting at Gallipoli. By the time the Anzacs withdraw 8 months later in December 1915, a further 6,000 will be dead. When the war ends in 1918, Australia is a different country.
Australia had a very small population, I think less than 5 million in 1914. You have 330,000, mostly men, going overseas to fight. 60,000 of them didn't come back. And so you're looking at a small country with a small population that suffered a loss that was unprecedented, that nobody was really expecting when it began.
Anzac Day is the byproduct of two powerful emotions: elation of national pride and the sting of private grief. Many of the first commemorations of Anzacs occur on the battlefield itself. They're conducted by comrades of the dead.
They wanted to give men a decent burial, and the padres worked very hard to make sure that that happened, usually at night, you know, under cover of darkness, burying men when they could. And their mates wanted to know that they'd been buried well, and I'm sure their families did too.
The Anzacs' makeshift graves are marked by wooden crosses, made from empty ammunition boxes.
They'd also take the tins that carried water across the peninsula. They'd beat that tin and they'd inscribe, quite lovingly, an inscription for that man. So you imagine the labour of that, etching that man's name, the date of his death, and perhaps a message there.
When the Anzacs finally withdraw, the dead fill the thoughts of the living.
You read accounts of men saying, you know, I hope they don't hear us as we're marching down the gullies to leave. And one of the padres sprinkled wattle seeds, you know, so he'd leave a bit of Australia on the Gallipoli Peninsula, on the graves.
The Anzacs may have passed their test, but now their families are counting the cost.
You actually have these private memorials that are set up in homes, on mantelpieces. The rooms of the men themselves become a kind of shrine. They're actually very fragile assemblies of the pictures of men, the medals of men, the artefacts that are brought home. It could be a comb, it could be a Bible, something that carries a sense of that man. These become the focal point of a kind of shrine that families construct around the memory of that lost individual.
If we count as a family a person's parents, children, siblings, aunts and uncles and cousins, then every second Australian family is bereaved by the war. Its impact rolls through the towns and suburbs of Australia like a great wave of grief. Throughout the 1920s, Australian communities, both large and small, right across the country, built thousands of memorials, reminders set in stone about the sacrifices of war. The Anzac Dawn service is without a doubt a signature event on the Australian calendar. Every year Australians rise before daybreak and gather at the time of day that the original Anzacs landed in Turkey. The ceremony is theatrical, cathartic and very Australian. And at its heart is the story of a grieving woman, or so the story goes.
On Anzac Eve in 1927, a number of veterans of the First World War were returning home from an Anzac Eve gathering and witnessed an elderly woman attempting to lay a wreath of flowers on the cenotaph. And so they sought to help her place that sheaf of flowers. And the soldiers went away from that experience of wreath laying and silence and a woman's grief, committed to wanting to replicate that occasion in the future. Now that origin story, whether it's the truth or not, what we do know is true is that the first dawn service officially is held at Sydney's Cenotaph in Martin Place in 1928.
Throughout the 1930s, the dawn service becomes exceptionally popular right across the nation. Anzac Day is now deeply embedded in the Australian way of life. By 1927, Anzac Day is a public holiday in every state, and from the 1930s, it's broadcast by the ABC each year on the radio.
Anzac is not one story, it's the weaving together of many stories. And today, every Australian is welcome on Anzac Day. And during the hush of the minute's silence, every Australian is free to consider what the Anzac story means to them. This is the simple and profound truth about Anzac, lest we forget.